All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We are going to give some folks just a couple seconds to get in the room and get settled, but just wanted to welcome everyone to Scaling Up. I'm very excited to kick off this session. We are going to be talking marketing readiness, building the foundation for scalable growth today. As marketers, we know before we can scale in any way. In marketing, it's important to make sure that our infrastructure is ready for that growth, meaning technology, our people, exec teams, third-party teams you may work with, and just that overall patient experience. So today we're going to be diving in on how some healthcare organizations are evaluating their marketing readiness, what they're looking for within their organizations, and steps they're taking to make sure that before anything goes live, everything is looking good. So my name is Erin Rawlings. I'm a group account director here at Cardinal. Again, very excited to talk about this topic. It is such a important and foundational topic that really just helps to set the stage for everything that we do in marketing. I'd love to kick off by having our panelists just introduce themselves. A quick overview of who you are, the organization you work with, and what you do at that organization would be great. Diane is at the top of my Zoom view here. So Diane, if you don't mind just giving us a quick intro, that would be great.
Hey everyone, I'm Diane Vaccaro. I work at 42 North Dental, and I've been here nearing 4 years now. I have a very long career, spanning healthcare, retail, and fashion way back when. And, the challenges every day here is really kind of taking a relatively doctor-centric organization and reminding everybody we're here for the patients. And really, I draw on my, long history of being very consumer focused to, make that a reality in this organization. So I think, that's my role. It's less about the marketing and more about the patient and being their advocate.
Love that so much. Thanks so much for that intro. Christy, you're next on my list.
Great. Hey, everyone. Christy Barker, Vice President of Marketing at Wells Street Urgent Care. So we operate 150 plus urgent cares across 4 states. So my role here is in new patient acquisition, patient retention, and of course, provider relationships. That all goes along with it. But excited to be here with you all today.
Thanks so much. Josh, you're next.
Darren. I'm Josh Harvey, Director of Marketing here at Signature Dental Partners. I started a year ago, effectively October 14th, so 2 weeks ago. It's been an exciting transition into the dental world from ophthalmology, where I spent 6 years, so I'm 7 years in healthcare marketing. I like to think that I started my marketing career in the sort of creative realm, and then slowly transitioned into internet marketing, and more technical and analytics, and really shaped and shifted myself from all things reporting, analytics, trying to be as progressive as I could with data. And before I really knew that I would be settling into the sort of management and leadership side, I was asking a hard question, kind of at the break of the decade: where are things going with AI, and what will that look like? And for better or worse, I was more afraid AI would just take over all the technical roles. I don't think that's entirely true, but here we are, and I'm trying to take all the talent and skill I built in that time with me in the leadership side, so I can help develop our organization and the staff within my team.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And hey, Heather, do you mind just giving us a quick overview of who you are, what you do, and the organization you work with would be great.
Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me because I was having some technical difficulty.
We can.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Heather DeLassy. I am currently the marketing director at Community Minds. I've been here for about a month and a half. And I am focusing really on everything related to marketing here for the organization. It's a startup mental health organization. So prior to being here, I've done 20 plus years at various organizations in healthcare and nonprofit, doing, as I said, sort of everything marketing related. I feel like in many ways I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. I'm sure many marketers can relate to. So, I'm here just to help to really build the organization from the ground up. And I'm really excited to be a part of this panel.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heather. It sounds like we've got a great panel here, but also a great mix of organizations that are kind of in different places in terms of kind of marketing readiness. So excited to dive in with y'all. Before we really get started, we're going to do a quick poll. So audience participation is highly encouraged. In terms of, 2025 moving into 2026, would love to hear from our audience of really what is your top priority for strengthening that marketing readiness this year or as you prep into next year. So we'll give the folks just a few seconds to answer. I'm sure all of these options of answers to select, we will, I'm sure, at least touch on today. Just a couple seconds. Can you all see the Q&A? Did it pop up? How about now? All right. Thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate it. All right. Give it maybe just another minute, and then we will be diving into some really great conversations. All right. All right. So we don't have like one clear winner, but I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Integrating that martech stack and data silos definitely seems to be our leader. Enhancing the patient experience, which Diane, I think goes back to kind of a little bit of, what you mentioned, physician-centered and kind of moving into patient-centered, which is great. Upskilling team, which I think definitely lends into, Josh's kind of POV on some AI, and improving operational and C-suite alignment, which I know we've been discussing across a couple sessions already today. So let's dive in. I think just to start and kick us off, a question for the group. Again, thinking this year and into 2026 planning, when you think about your team this year, what part of marketing readiness has really been like your biggest priority, and what's helped make that progress real? In terms of either implementation or things you're looking out for, or people that you're kind of adding to your team. Anyone can feel free to pipe in.
I think for us, it's very much a high level thought of how do we prioritize? So I know sometimes as marketers, like we have the tendency to want to do everything. But I think we've really started to take the lens of whatever we choose to do is going to be a trade-off. So if we do this, what are we not doing? And I think framing it up that way and making sure that what we're choosing to do is really aligned with the rest of the organizational priorities and goals has been a little bit of a different way for us to approach it this year.
Christy, that's so important, right? It's just like we don't have infinite resources. And as marketers, I think, was it Heather who said we're a jack of all trades and we do everything and we're going to add more and more to our plate? That's not the solution, right? And it's sort of identifying the key priorities, the big problems, and then building a solution, across the organization, not in functional silos, to really address it and make sure it is a priority of the organization, right? So, whether it's online scheduling or introducing AI, what are the impacts up and down the funnel in the marketing world, but then across the organization, I think is really important.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. And I think part of the struggle is alignment, not just with the internal ops teams, whether that's your regional leaders, your OMs asking for requests, right, and support and help, but even your board, right? I mean, I had a situation recently where there's a disbelief that there's a conversion issue with calls. And so you have to maintain some degree of independence and a third party objective opinion, which I think can be AI or data, right? Just, AI is maybe an evolution of data intelligence, but the better and more prepared information you have, again, and that's not qualitative, that's quantitative, at least you're enriching the discussion with those people and they're getting the benefit, right? So I think of this in kind of two ways. It's breaking down those silos, getting as much data as you can. And I want to be specific. I mean, that might be availability at your clinics, right? It might be like how many providers and doctors and ops do you have, to maybe sending out surveys to your OMs, and how do you organize getting that information and then layering that into the more enterprise perspective, and then break it down into regional cohorts or growth offices or operational ready ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to, especially from a marketing perspective, I feel, again, going back to kind of Heather's comment of jack of all trades, marketing is always the solution, right? But making sure that we are equipped from our side as marketers with that data, with those, those pieces of information to make sure that what we are proposing from a strategic perspective is going to make sense for the business, but is also going to be realistic in terms of what we can provide and deliver. And I think setting those expectations too of, hey, this is something we want to roll out. Here's our anticipated impact. That may or may not happen, but we have a, kind of a fail safe if it doesn't, and a celebration planned if it does. So I think that's very important. We are in the thick of many organizations' budgeting seasons. So, I think, Diane, from your perspective, like when you're building budgets, how do you test whether, your organization is really ready for the marketing that you're either proposing or wanting to fund, whether that be from staffing, systems, patient experience, kind of all together?
It's such a broad question, right? And, I go back to my career in retail. I was with a failing retail, Sears Holdings, right? And so our inclination was cut, 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 right? But it was like the opposite side of that coin is where you take that next available dollar and where do you deploy it? So one of the things, that I've looked at here, and again, I hear from my dentist, I need more new patients. I need more new patients, right? And some of you out there are in dental practices and that's all you hear. Well, I wanted to understand, A, what's the value of a new patient by practice? So how well are you converting that patient into either a compliant patient who comes back, and are you retaining them? Or B, are you selling in a treatment plan? Because those absolute numbers only tell part of the story. So if I divide into cohorts, right? My January 2024 cohort, 18 months ago, how much have they actually contributed? And I can basically say, listen, practice A, you've only retained 50% of those new patients, whereas this practice B, has retained 75%, my benchmark. That's a better spend, and I'm going to put my money there. So that is, one of the ways that I actually try to, deploy a resource or a dollar. I don't have an infinite supply, so I want to make sure I spend it in the place that's actually going to matter.
Yeah.
So budget building, really understanding who's performing and where that next available dollar goes, I think is really important.
Yeah, and that's super helpful. And Josh, kind of stemming from that, not only from maybe like a practice by practice, because I know you're also in dental. Where do you kind of decide in terms of whether that be marketing channel, digital, non-digital, not just from a practice by practice basis, but what from a marketing perspective are you really looking for in terms of where you're going to invest that next dollar?
Yeah, it's really, initially was thinking that office by office, and I was like, you know what, like this really should start how I started here at Signature, was a channel efficacy. I mean, it was very different moving into dental, where federal insurance is generally a problem. So we should be looking at a channel and saying, what's the overall efficacy across multiple offices, right? Because when you think about a services organization, be it DSO, MSO of any kind, or any kind of administrative head, our benefit, right? And this is true even when you look at a board. A board has multiple portcos. One portco has multiple offices, and they all have this like upward funnel perspective of everything that's going on. And so, what our individual offices and regionals don't really know, aside from that they're not marketing by trade, is how does this look across the whole organization? Generally, you may have a few outliers. That's true for any distribution graph. But if we're looking at something, and I'll just use Google Ads, and we're finding, hey, this is generally kind of broken, or we're working towards a fix, or it needs this, but we're not quite there yet, then you can at least communicate that with the expectation. If you just want to turn stuff on, I mean, we can do that, but just understand that the efficacy is not going to translate into the expected result you're looking for. So that's one thing in terms of prioritizing, like, hey, we're building a budget, we're expecting it by channel, and how's that going to break down? And then on a per office basis, I think it's pretty straightforward in terms of looking at things like what's their current new patient performance, like what's their total existing patient base, and then qualitatively talking about providers and stuff like that. But I like starting at the sort of channel efficacy side.
Yeah, I agree. And I think putting those two things together, and again, like, I think this is where kind of our marketing and operations alignment, definitely comes in of, if a practice is not meeting that 75% threshold, like Diane mentioned, is there a reason? Are the leads that we're sending them poor quality, or is there something, kind of elsewhere in the market that's happening of, why patients are not maybe following through with treatment plans? We can get the initial visit in, but it's getting them to stick that's the problem, and that becomes more of a retention question, and seeing where marketing can help to support rather than drive. I know I'm seeing some comments of kind of putting dollars maybe where the office is the loudest sometimes. And Heather, from your perspective, how do you evaluate requests that are coming into the marketing team, from those that are outside of marketing? How do you kind of evaluate where a request aligns with true business goals, and versus like it's just an urgent request that may not kind of have as much impact as maybe thought further on down the road? How do you kind of evaluate those kind of requests?
Yeah, I mean, you have to take a look exactly as everyone sort of mentioned at really what's sort of the overall strategic organization goal drivers, right? Like being very patient centric. Certainly I know since the great thing about being new to an organization right now is being able to kind of audit and come in and understand where everything's at, and sort of really talking to each department and the leadership to say, what are our like really three main drivers, right? Like where are we looking to align as a business? And certainly being patient centric is first and foremost number one. And outside of that, and sort of like I've been given three very targeted goals that like marketing fits into. And if it doesn't necessarily fit into that, to say this might be like a nice have or something that would be great to do, but because it doesn't necessarily align with these three priorities and main goals at this point in time, is it something that we absolutely have to move forward with, or is it something that we can, sort of revisit? So I think it's always kind of asking those questions and making sure it's going to be a driver somewhere that's going to either look to build business, talk about like brand and identity, or maybe even as you're scaling, how it's going to help, support that. So that's sort of my reference with regards to how I take something as like this is a super urgent request versus if this is really aligning with overall business goals. So really looking at the big picture and managing expectations and being able to comfortably sort of ask those questions and state that. So it's not just saying I don't want to do this, I can't do this. It's really saying how does this really once again, the greatest good for the greatest number, so to speak.
It's a great way to put it. Thanks for that. And I think, once, we've got our kind of marketing strategy set, those budget conversations have been had, kind of the next step in that is the kind of operational alignment. So Christy, would love to hear from you in terms of like your approach of getting buy-in from clinical teams, operations side, when it comes to those marketing changes. How are you kind of capturing their their interest of where they want to see, you know, marketing go to, I think, help them feel heard. I think helps a lot with that trust between marketing and operations sometimes. But what are you really looking for? What specific questions are you asking, you know, those clinical teams?
Yeah, I think the marketing ops alignment and partnership is probably one of the most important. You have got to really be in lockstep with your operations team. And getting that buy-in starts way before you need the buy-in. So you've got to be building that relationship. You need to know their goals inside and out, know what they care about, what are the KPIs they're looking at, what are they paying attention to? So really knowing their side of the business so that you can approach them as a true partner, not just somebody who needs something from them or vice versa. I think then once you figure out kind of what it is you need to partner on, what is it you're asking them for, if you're going to roll out a new initiative, I think sometimes as marketers, we roll them out in a silo and we forget that like we're sitting at a desk. We're not in front of these patients all day. That is a whole different world when you're in the clinic. So you have to think through how is this going to impact them? What is the ask of their front line? Like right now, we're going into cold and flu season. I'm not rolling out anything new to our clinics right now because they are about to get slammed with cold and flu. So really being mindful of what's important to them, what are they worried about? How is the initiative you're rolling out going to impact them? And how can you make it easy for them? Is it you know, an easier training guide for them? Is it getting there in the center and kind of being elbow to elbow with their team? So I think that partnership is so important and it really starts very early. And it has to just continuously be nurtured so that they see you as a true partner and a value.
Yeah, that's great.
Dollars.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's important too. I think, especially getting in front of the faces of those teams, like you're truly able to hear, you know, from a primary source of what that patient experience is looking like, because they are the ones setting that patient experience. You know, patient may come across the website, you know, they may book an appointment online, but they're going to remember if the, you know, the front desk was nice, or if, you know, they had to do a bunch of paperwork in office, rather, you know, they could have done it online on their own time prior to their appointment. So those are the things that I think they're truly going to remember. And then impact, you know, the non-digital kind of word of mouth marketings down the road too. Of, oh, I had a great experience at, you know, this organization. My friend should go there. So I think, Heather, from your perspective, how do you kind of ensure, again, from front desk to kind of provider, that everyone's able to explain the services in a way that patients are going to understand, and that in a way that we as marketers hope that those things can be explained?
Sure. So, I mean, I think something that I always have remembered, I mean, I've been in so many different verticals at this point. I've done ophthalmology, I've done anesthesiology, I've done dentistry. Now I'm in mental health, I've done hematology, oncology. And as marketers, we need to sort of become experts, right? And really understand, you know, my family jokes around that I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV
Yep.
because I have to be able to give information in you know, in digestible lay friendly format. So I think you always have to think in all of these verticals, we're working in them, we're immersed in them, and we think everyone understands everything exactly like we do because we're so immersed in the business, right? So I think you have to really understand and make it so that when you're on your website, when you are talking to patients at the front desk, you know, when people are calling in on the phone, to be able to give them information that it's almost as if it's something brand new that's being presented to them, and to understand that people will have different varying levels of, you know, what they do know, but really trying to get out of the weeds and treat it very simply. Like some people in dentistry didn't know why it's important to have a biannual prophy, right? To why it's important just to clean your teeth, and neglecting that and what it can do, and always remembering, you know, the token sort of like what's in it for me, like bringing back to you know, to them, like what the value and understanding of the patient is, and giving some of those points so it's very understandable and why they will want to then hopefully, you know, move forward with your service or treatment. So
Great. That's super helpful. You know, in part of kind of that like consumer education piece of really making, you know, complicated processes or topics, more digestible and easy to understand. Um, just overall, I mean, what types of consumer behaviors do you see healthcare really still struggling to adapt to? Again, there's that patient education piece, but are there any other kind of just behaviors that you see either patient or general consumers within healthcare just really struggling to keep up with?
I think it's just credible, like where you really get your credible information. There's so much information that's out there, and I think we're so consumed by information as, people. And I think it's just making sure like how you're able to make sure that your information is accurate and credible and on point, and that people will sort of, utilize that as a lot of people say, oh, I saw online this, I saw online that, right? So it's sort of, I think, making sure that, that it is very like on point and clear and accurate, and that people can understand it in various formats too. You also have to think about your different audiences, right? In one part of the country, in one part of the, even in the same state, things can be very different from different, audiences and demographics, and sort of like also being able to tailor information to all of those audiences and demographics is something, resources and understanding all of that and how to present that also in a HIPAA compliant fashion too, right? Sometimes that also comes into play. So I think, kind of trying to deal with all of that is where healthcare has to kind of maintain all of that balance, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Any other thoughts from the group on just some behaviors that either your organization is struggling with or you've noticed in past experiences?
Yeah, so, again, I go back over my very long career. Retail, we were much further ahead, and then I went into healthcare. I went into optometry, right? And and then dentistry, and dentistry is behind, big healthcare organizations. It's just amazing to me. And there's so much opportunity. I say, look at your front door, both your physical practice front door. Are you welcoming patients? Is there a good front desk? Are they trained appropriately? So physically, what does the front door look like? And then your digital front door. Are you opening up the pathways for people to find you and come and visit you? Right. So, again, we instituted online scheduling way back when, and then we changed our PMS system. And then we really went through and adopted that again. Back in optometry, I had practices, 75% of the patient flow was coming through online scheduling. It was exciting, and, and it was really well converting. Dentistry is very, very different because, time of a schedule is really dear to a dentist. And so they don't necessarily want to open up availability. So, in partnering with the operations team and making sure we're ready for patients, it is required of all the new doctor hires that they go on the online scheduler because they are building their patient base. And so this is an accommodation that we made with the operations team, that we're going to build this new doctor's schedule. Not everybody has to be on it, but you've got to have somebody in that practice on it so that we have a frictionless way, or less friction way, for a patient to get in because they expect it. I haven't ordered a pizza by calling a restaurant in years, right? I have a member of my team who's been dismissed from Open Table because she overused it and didn't show up. But that's what your patients expect, and it's just a basic point of entry for going, for addressing our patients' needs. And so those are the kinds of steps that healthcare, and in particular dentistry, need to continue to make.
I agree. I think the ease of online scheduling is huge. I think especially for those at least of my generation. I would rather just do something quick on my phone than talk to people. And
100%, even
yeah.
my generation, Erin.
I think a risk you take with that though is making it, too easy, that sometimes it may look like, overinflated performance. So Josh, I think just speaking to kind of your experience on the, the analytics and the data side, like how are you utilizing data to gauge if, you know, yeah, if an effort is, really operationally ready, again, we can make sure that we've got the best online patient experience, or what we feel is the best online patient experience. We can make sure our teams are trained, but what data are you really looking at on your end to see, are we truly ready for, everything that we are ready to kind of move forward with?
Yeah, sounds good. Let me break this down in two ways. I think as we're running a marketing program that's geared towards calls, or maybe calls and forms, or some sort of like quasi online booking process, right? Then there's a response to lead time. I think both of those can be looked at, and let me then dive in even further, right? Because if you're just thinking about marketing from the paid side of calls, like then maybe you have to think about like lead quality. But wouldn't it be then beneficial just to look at all calls, right? I mean, marketing is in some ways, right, going to be involved in touching calls pretty much through the internet, right? Depending on how your business is set up and the way you think about, are we like internet based? And a lot of calls do flow through the internet, whether that's, GVP, right, or the websites or insurance websites or what have you. So then just look at all calls. Like, so I wish I could say I was further along in this process because there's a lot of work ahead of me, but this is something I've been really laying the foundation for 2026 is, our company in particular doesn't have someone just sitting around doing call analytics. And so this is a world that's been near and dear to my heart. As at one point in my past life, I was second to reporting on the call center for a 60 person call center. So I learned a lot through that process. But I'd like to just say like schedule rate, right? And there's some really cool AI tech. So I won't get there yet because we've got a section to talk about AI. But then maybe just dig in more to call analytics. Like calls is not that helpful. It needs to be break down to colors, right? And opportunities, because we should be thinking about it in a person sense. And then, again, as it relates to forms or, health directories or booking requests, I think response to lead time there is really important. And then saying like, are you really already handling what we're providing you? And if not, then let's talk about that. And then the next piece is going to be something that's relatively new that I've been thinking or talking about for a long time, but haven't had a lot of success with, which is how do we look beyond just acquisition and new patients and look at total, right? Total people, and just apply that to any business. It doesn't have to be healthcare. It can be healthcare, to Diane's point, it could be fashion, but we're talking about people at the end of the day. That's what we're selling to. But when I think about that, helps you then kind of break things down, or should we be driving, right, leads and then talking about what I just said, schedule rate or response time, or should we be talking about retention? And then how would new patients pace towards replacing a retention issue, right? If you're double or triple the loss on your total patient base or existing patients, then new patients are going to take twice as long or 3 times as long to try to fill that gap so that they're potentially growing, right? Because those two things have to happen for us to get visits up, generally speaking. And I just want to say this isn't always black and white, right? Because marketing could be driving a program specific to treatment or emergency or something. Of course, that's probably more dental, but there's other healthcare that could be applicable to. And then you're not getting continuation of care. I haven't been in my current position at this company long enough to believe that would have been my strategy. But I know it's possible, and I just want to throw that out there. And then the final thing, and this is, I like to think about it this way more from like a serving your board perspective and talking with your SLT and ELT is, but it can be disseminated down to other conversations. And again, this is somewhat AI centric to me because I've been working with generative AI to kind of break down segments of what is true demand versus where are we having efficiency issues with doctor days that relates to visits, right? Either too many doctors, not enough days. So think of it as like your top line metrics, your midline metrics becomes a little more operational, right? And then your lower metrics still going to be like your cash flow and your EBITDA. And when you think about it in that kind of breakdown, then you're like, okay, where am I and where can we have a conversation? If nothing else, then just as a leader, like you can have a conversation that will allow them to go have a conversation with somebody else that would be, all right, you know what? I think what we discovered in the marketing conversation is not a demand issue, but the conversation should continue to go on so that we can get that fixed, so that it can eventually come back to marketing.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what Christy had kind of mentioned at the top of of our discussion of priority, right? Like we can't solve all problems at once, but where where does it feel like we may have more of an immediate fix, which is easier in quotes to fix, right? Versus more of a long-term strategy that needs to be built up and explored and put in place. And I think part of that too comes from just assessments and auditing the patient journey, auditing what exists. Heather is someone who is working with a newer organization. Like what is your kind of like 30, 60, 90 like readiness kind of plan or assessment process? Like what are you really looking for as like a measure of success or area of opportunity in that kind of 30, 60, 90 frame?
Yeah, so really being in the thick of this is so relevant. And I've had to have 30-day check-in. I'm going to have my 45-day check-in. Kind of how I'm progressing towards an overall 90-day framework. I think you really have to, no matter what organization, it's something that I've done. You really just have to. People are like, well, you're marketing. Why are you immersing yourself in everything, right? Like really understanding. I've sat in. I was right before this panel. I was on a patient journey call, and like a lot of the pain points that are being received by operations and patients, they could end up impacting marketing from a reputation management standpoint. It may also be with technology and being used, something that marketing is experiencing as a pain point as well. So it's really kind of being a part of all the different teams and understanding how their pain points and what they're dealing with, or some of their successes, or what their objectives are and everything like that, how you can like align and fit in with that. And it's not just, as Christy said, we're sitting at a desk and everything else. It's not just sort of being like, in theory, this is what marketing is supposed to be, to be doing. It's auditing, it's, assessing, it's taking immediate action. And, being new to an organization, there's definitely a lot of sort of understanding and planning, but there's also immediate execution, like what is something that the organization needs now from marketing that's going to have a big impact, and where do you fit in that process? And obviously always looking to, I say, make it fluid, right? Like you make a plan, there's a draft, there's a version, it's going to change. Timelines are going to change. Everything is going to change. Things are going to change based on, the organization might pivot all of a sudden. So I think it's, being flexible and adaptable, but really understanding the bigger picture and how the details as well, marry each other, and where the rubber hits the road, and where you can, once again, with the guiding principles and goals of the organization, where you can have the most impact, where it's the highest impact. And also, like, we're looking to launch a new sub program to a specific group of individuals for our services. But do we have really we can market anything, but do we have the operational nuts and bolts in place to actually market the program? We could say coming soon, and do a teaser, but until there's really a provider in place and everything that needs to be done operationally to do marketing for that, it really doesn't make sense. So we can understand what marketing is going to look like once all the pieces are in place. But just to start marketing something for the sake of marketing something because we have a brand or a program, it really doesn't make sense if there's not going to be the substance behind it. So, I think it's just always having sort of those plans, even if you're in an organization for a while, always looking to say, where do we want to be in 30 days, or 6 months or 9 months, or a year, and knowing that you sort of have like some big goals you want to achieve. And also then there's going to be a lot of little goals that will kind of creep in, and how that all works, and just always evaluating and assessing and pivoting when needed.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that, not only making sure, like you said, like the operational nuts and bolts are in place, but also really going through and auditing the patient journey and experience of existing programs or campaigns to learn from. Christy, would love to hear, just like your process for looking at either existing, pieces that you have in place, prior to launching either new campaigns or new practices? Like, what are you looking at from like an overall patient experience perspective?
I mean, it sounds super simple, but it's oftentimes missed. Just walk through it as if you are a patient. Start where they would start. Where are they first engaging with you? Where are they coming in through this campaign? Walk through all of those pieces. Are there links that are going to the wrong place? Is there outdated information? I spent Friday afternoon auditing our chat bot. Do not recommend on a Friday afternoon. But went through all of those flows, and I was shocked at how many dead ends I had, how much outdated information. It's just one of those things that have been put in place and not revisited. So really need to audit that kind of on an ongoing basis. You'd be surprised at what you find. And outside of the steps within the campaign, I think there's really two things that get missed oftentimes when you're launching a new campaign or thinking through that process. And my light keeps going out in here. One is, how are you measuring success? What is this campaign supposed to drive? How are you measuring success? What are the metrics you're looking back? Going back to what Josh said, like, what are you measuring and how do you know that it's working? And then number two, have you informed all of the right people? I've had cases where we have this great campaign, it's working, ops is in line, but oops, we forgot to inform finance and there's actually a discount involved or some key person was missed. So I think those are two things to really think through in addition to all of the other pieces of links and such.
That's great. Appreciate it. And we are coming up right on time, but just before we close, thinking ahead again, as we are, 62 days maybe from the end of the year, you know, what is one thing, and this is a question for the group, so, you know, whoever unmutes first, you know, what's one thing that you and your organization are really looking to do differently in 26 to really strengthen the readiness as you continue to scale? Again, whether that be, you know, number of practices or spend or, you know, numbers of campaigns or programs, like what is one thing you're looking at differently that, you know, you may have learned in 25 or you knew was a problem going into 25 and it just got kind of pushed and pushed?
Can I maybe just jump in on this?
Go for it.
So you know, we've talked a lot about operational readiness here, and I just want to challenge everyone to think about how can we ask, in the age of technology, and just assuming that there's going to be a utopia of Terminators that just love to do our laundry and all that stuff, like, why don't we just have some of this technology just automate some of this stuff? Or we're just like, I don't want to like, it's an ops thing, it's a marketing thing, like, right? And I love what Heather said, right? We're fully immersed. We're all leaders. We're executives, right? And it's important to say, what are we doing? What are we not doing? Therefore, you need to know a little bit about what you're not doing, right? But you get a perspective specific to yours. You see some of the purview, right? And let's introduce some automation, like some technology. I think that's going to lessen the load. Maybe that helps you in a front office transition where, you know, they're doing a replacement or someone left or whatever, right? Maybe it helps you keep non-provider labor costs down. Maybe it just helps you improve conversion, right? And that was really my approach coming here in, you know, the end of 2024. And really my approach in 2026 is, you know, I'm not trying to like take jobs away. I'm trying to leaven and improve the quality. And AI is going to be a part of that, right? But there's other stuff that can do that too. I think online scheduling, albeit it's not perfect, that helps. It helps. So that's kind of my two piece on you know, AI and kind of what we can do.
Embracing the robots to make our lives easier, for sure. Diane, go ahead.
I was going to say, just following off of Josh, we've deployed a virtual PCR, right? And, you know, what are those key metrics that she's supposed to address? We started not with answering the phones, but dialing for dollars and doing collection, right? Because our CFO wanted to prove this out, that this was a worthwhile investment. You know, now I haven't necessarily seen a reduction in missed calls. It's all over the place, and we're really on top of that. But the nice thing is that my leads have stayed the same, so I'm a believer that there is an opportunity here. But we're actually doing a slight pivot and introducing our virtual PCR into our confirmation process, because our you know, is there an improvement that we can make in reducing missed appointments, by having a more impactful confirmation process, because that goes to the bottom line, right? It is just a patient that doesn't show up and they're in the schedule. How do you solve that? So, again, these are all conversion techniques. I would say the other thing as a marketer, I'm old enough to remember that we started mobile first, right? Now it's AI first, right? AI driven search first. And so how am I reorganizing my website and my content? Because I've got tons of content, but how am I serving it up? And I would challenge everybody to look at your content and how are you serving it up? Because we're going to be in, as Josh said, an AI driven world.
Yep, absolutely. Heather, 2026, what's top of your priority list?
Yeah, I mean, I think, aside from what Diane and Josh have said, I think it's really exactly leveraging technology to have us work smarter, not harder, right? There always needs to be a human element. We always need to be involved. But once again, it's sort of saying, how is the technology going to make sense to capture certain information, to make something more automated, so then we can take our time and efforts and put it towards how we're going to look to maybe grow something or do something that's going to then take what we've built and make the foundation even better, right? So I totally agree. It's not saying it's a replacement, but it's how it's going to be able to help, especially as you're scaling and growing in size and maybe states and geographical location. Like you can't just rely on people to do all of the processes that need to be done for the organization. So it's really making sense of how that can help with the day-to-day workflows.
Christy, 26.
For us, also super focused on AI search, reorganizing our site, our content. We know that is the way people are searching. I believe Google PPC is going to start to decrease with the rise of this. But also going back to something Diane said earlier, where do we deploy that next dollar? We have lots of channels going. Where do we invest more? What's really working? What do we need to invest in that we haven't tried? So looking for where that next incremental dollar will be best spent.
Awesome. Great. Well, lots on the horizon with, our marketing teams in people and robots both for 2026. But really appreciate, the insights that you all have shared. Thank you so much for tuning in and appreciate again this team's insights and your time today. So thanks so much for joining.